What's up, guys? This is Michael Fordham, and welcome back to Deeper Dive CFB. Today we're going to be recapping Week 8 of college football. It was another good week, starting to get towards the end of the year, where it's all conference games, and another really good week of football. A few crazy upsets, and just a few really good games. So right before we get into it, guys, I just wanted to say, my last video was way too long, and I realized that after it didn't get very many views just because it's kind of intimidating to see a video that's like 40 minutes long. So I'm going to kind of condense it a little bit. I'm only going to talk about the main points from each conference. I'm not going to go through every game like I did last week. And also, guys, just like I have been doing, I'm going to leave the timestamps for each conference to sort it out. And if you're just here to watch my take on your team or a specific conference, y'all be able to access that in the description below. With that, guys, let's get right into it. All right, guys, starting with the ACC, Clemson used a strong second half to go on the road and beat Louisville 45-10. But this game was a lot closer than the final score indicated. It was 17-3 late in the third quarter. They used a great run game with Travis Etienne to kind of pull away. He had 14 rushes for 192 yards and a touchdown. Trevor Lawrence played pretty well overall. 20-29 for 233 and 3 touchdowns, but he had 2 really bad picks. Both of them were just bad decisions right over the middle of the field. Trying to go in a double or triple coverage and just hoping one of those receivers in T. Higgins or Justin Ross can come down with it, but that's not a good strategy. And they have such a good offense, such a good game plan that Trevor doesn't need to force those throws. And it's been a problem all year. He's got 3 games this year where he has 2 picks or more. So at the end of the day, they're just gonna be better than every team they play. I'm gonna mention here in a minute about the ACC Coastal. It's just a mess. But the ACC in general is just not a good conference, and Clemson's not going to have a tough test. It's probably going to be at South Carolina, the last game of the year. It's going to really be their biggest test. The next 2 weeks they host Boston College and Wofford, so shouldn't have any trouble there. It was nevertheless a very good performance from the Tigers. Next, guys, Miami is stunned at home by Georgia Tech, 28-21. Georgia Tech took advantage of some Miami blunders in this game. First drive of the game, backs up towards their end zone. N'Kosi Perry fumbles the ball, and Georgia Tech falls on it in the end zone for a touchdown. They also had a fake punt pass that went for a touchdown as well. So kind of finding different ways to win. Miami also missed 3 field goals, which is never good. And one of them was with 30 seconds left. It was a 35-yard chip shot, and he kicked it way too low, and it got blocked. Once again, not a very clean game for Miami. Perry was 16-28 for 188 and 2 touchdowns, but getting beat by Georgia Tech, who's first year under Jeff Collins, to have that team come in and beat you is just downright embarrassing. Manny Diaz is gonna have to make some changes, one of which might be the quarterback position. As everybody knows, they have Tate Martell. Tate Martell, big recruit out of Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas. He ends up going to Ohio State for 2 years. Lost the battle to Dwayne Haskins last year, and whenever Justin Fields transferred, Martell went over to Miami, and we haven't seen him, really at all. He kind of, flirted with the idea of playing receiver just to try to get on the field, but we haven't seen him at all. And at the end of the day, Miami's 3-4. They've got nothing to lose. They go to Pitt and to Florida State these next 2 weeks. If I'm Manny Diaz, I pull the trigger and I try to go with Tate Martell for no other reason than just to provide a little bit of spark. There's just not much excitement, and I think Tate Martell would be perfect for Miami football. Try to get the fan base back into it. He's a very electrifying player. I put the best athlete on the field and see what he can do. And then, like I mentioned, guys, the ACC Coastal is just completely up for grabs. There's 5 teams in contention right now. It's Virginia at the top, and then you've also got Pitt, Virginia Tech, North Carolina, and Duke all in there too. It's really anybody's division at this point. Just some notes from this week. Virginia Tech beat North Carolina 43-41 in 6 overtimes. Just a crazy game. I'll leave the link in the description for that game. Starting in the 5th overtime this year, teams will alternate a 2-point conversion, and we actually saw that in this game. Both teams missed their 2-point conversion in the 5th overtime. North Carolina got the ball first in 6 OT, and they missed it, and Virginia Tech was able to run it in. Really tough loss from North Carolina. They're 3-4 right now, and they could easily be 7-0. I mean, they've lost 4 games by an average of 3 points. Some really tough losses this year for sure. And that's going to be frustrating for Mac Brown and that fan base. I guess the good thing for them is they're still right in it, just 1 game behind Virginia. 2 other games this week that definitely affected the Coastal. Pitt beat Syracuse 27-20. Pat Narduzzi's got the Panthers 5-2, and who knows? Maybe they can keep the magic rolling and possibly play Clemson in that title game for the 2nd year in a row. And then also, Virginia handles Duke 48-14. I think Virginia is probably the most talented team in this division. Like I said, these teams are all very mediocre. It's honestly anybody's division for the taking. Moving on to the Big Ten, guys, Penn State improves to 7-0 with a primetime win over Michigan. Really good start for the Nittany Lions in this game. Got out to a 21-0 lead. Sean Clifford was able to find DJ Hamler twice for 2 really nice deep throws. Puts a lot of air under the ball. Really lets Hamler just go and get it. Hamler had 6 catches for 108 yards and 2 touchdowns. So that was definitely a big combo in this game and was crucial in getting Penn State out to that big lead. I will say Shea Patterson did show some guts in this game. He was only 24 of 41 for 276. Still too many incompletions, too much inconsistency from him. Zach Charbonnet was good as well, 15 carries, 81 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But while this offense has been so inconsistent, you have to give a lot of credit to Shea Patterson. I mean, 21-0 on the road at Penn State, which is a hostile environment. And with all the negativity that's been around that program, it would have been easy for him to throw in the towel and just be like, man, I can't do this anymore. Shea showed a lot of fight in this game, and Michigan had 4th and goal with 2 minutes left to try and tie the game. And Patterson delivered a good ball on 4th and goal, and one of his big receivers, Ronnie Bell, dropped it and kind of let him down, and that was the ball game from there. But, good fight for Michigan, but I think this is much more about Penn State. Proved they were legit in this game, and now they're 7-0, like I said. And they'll go to Michigan State next week, and then they'll have a bye, and then they'll go to Minnesota. So, 2 somewhat tough road games coming up. I think they should be fine against Michigan State, and then Minnesota we'll talk about in a minute. They'll also have to go on the road to Columbus later in the year to play the Buckeyes. But as for Jim Harbaugh, now just one of 10 versus top 10 teams since becoming the head coach at Michigan, and that's just not going to cut it there. I mean, having to play Ohio State, Penn State, teams like that every year, Notre Dame like they have next week, Harbaugh's got to start winning some of those games, and they've got to, take that step past just being a 10-win program. Like I said, it's year 5, and those fans, rightfully so, are expecting some more out of Harbaugh, and he's just not delivering these big games. It's really frustrating for him because his team did play so well in the second half, but at the end of the day, you just can't spot a team like Penn State 21 points on the road and expect to win. Michigan will play number 8 Notre Dame at home next week. That's going to be a big game. I'm telling you, Harbaugh's got to get past this streak of losing the top 10 teams, or Michigan's never going to be where they want to go. Next, guys, Wisconsin loses at Illinois in what's possibly the biggest upset of the year. This is a crazy game. I was watching this game on the way up to the UT game, and I noticed, 3 turnovers for Wisconsin. Jonathan Taylor had a fumble in the red zone. Jack Cohn, last drive when they were trying to ice the clock, he had an interception. That was with 3 minutes left, and they also missed a field goal in the second half too. So those are 3 big plays that are essentially turnovers and just something that can't happen. Going on the road, you got to be able to execute those tiny little details, and Wisconsin's certainly unable to do that. Jack Cohn did play pretty well otherwise. 24 of 32, which was certainly a lot of pass attempts for a guy like Jack Cohn, but he had 264. Jonathan Taylor had a good game, 28 for 132, but both those guys kind of letting their team down late with turnovers, make those 2 big mistakes, and now they go on the road and lose to Illinois. Something that I don't think anybody was expecting, and certainly just such a damaging loss for Wisconsin. Such a good defense, and didn't play complimentary football, turning the ball over and giving their defense a short field. I was a big believer in Wisconsin coming into the year. We'll see if they can go on the road and compete with Ohio State. I still think it's going to be a close game. I mean, I'm not saying Wisconsin can't make a New Year's 6 or bounce back from this loss, but, this is a really bad loss. We'll see if they can find a way to bounce back next week on the road in the Horseshoe. Last in the Big Ten, guys, Minnesota and Ohio State went big on the road to stay undefeated. Starting with Ohio State, just thrashed Northwestern 52-3. Justin Fields was 18-23 for 194 and 4 touchdowns. K. Dobbins ran the ball 18 times for 121 yards, and he also had a 68-yard touchdown. This Northwestern team is really bad. I mean, this was a team last year that was able to, muster together a pretty good year and make it to the Big Ten championship game against the Buckeyes. They're now 1-5, and they're averaging 12.5 points per game, which is just that's almost unheard of. I mean, the job by the Buckeyes for not looking forward to next week and going on the road and taking care of business, but it doesn't really mean that much. I mean, Northwestern is terrible, like I've said. But I think the bigger story is Minnesota. They're now 7-0. Really rode the coattails of Rodney Smith. He had 19 carries for 111 yards and 2 touchdowns. I've mentioned Minnesota in my past few videos. Like I said, they're just kind of getting thrown under the rug, and rightfully so. They haven't played anybody, but that's certainly going to change. They host Maryland next week. Should be a win for them. And then they'll have the bye week, and then they'll have Penn State. They'll go on the road to Iowa, and then they'll play Wisconsin. So a back-heavy schedule for Minnesota. But, at the end of the day, you have to credit them. They're probably going to be undefeated when they host Penn State. They'll probably be 8-0, and hopefully Penn State is too. I do think it's good to see new teams kind of emerge. PJ Fleck's done a great job there. And, Minnesota's 7-0 and looking really good. Moving on to the Big 12, guys. Baylor moves to 7-0 with a big road win, 45-27 victory over Oklahoma State. And Charlie Brewer only threw the ball 17 times, but completed 13 of those for 312 yards and a touchdown. Josh Fleeks, Tyquan Thornton, and JaMychal Hasty both had catches of at least 63 yards. So, definitely showing the big playability there. And mentioning JaMychal Hasty, he had 16 runs for 146 and 2 touchdowns. And that included a big 73-yard touchdown run to kind of seal the game up. Moving over to Oklahoma State, Spencer Sanders, redshirt freshman quarterback, he had 3 turnovers, and he's just been too inconsistent for them to win these type of big games. Chuba Hubbard did have a good game, 32 carries, 171 yards, and 2 touchdowns, but it's just not enough. Playing a team like Baylor who's really starting to take that next step, definitely at the very least a team that's going to contend for the Big 12 championship. You just can't have that type of inconsistent quarterback play, and Oklahoma State's really struggled with that this year. So for Baylor, big win, like I said, 7-0. They'll have an off week, and then they'll host West Virginia. the following Thursday night. Should be no problems there. And as for Oklahoma State, they'll go on the road to Iowa State next week. And y'all know how I feel about Iowa State. I think they're a really good team. Very well put together, and that's going to be another tough game for them. So definitely have the talent with Spencer Sanders, Chuba Hubbard, and Tylen Wallace. But they're going to have to find a way to take care of the football if they're going to want to win some of these big games in the Big 12. Next, guys, Texas barely beats Kansas. It was 50-48 final. Cameron Dicker with a 35-yard field goal to win the game. I was there, guys. It was just unbelievable. You certainly have to give a lot of credit to Les Miles. He definitely had his guys ready to play. Carter Stanley, their quarterback, was 27-47 for 310 yards and 4 touchdowns. He also had nine rushes for 65 yards. And then Puka Williams, their star running back, he's only a sophomore. He had 25 carries for 190 and 2 touchdowns. And Kansas is really not as bad as people think, but definitely should have never been in this game. Texas got off to a 14-0 start. And, from being a Texas fan, it just seemed like we kind of took off the gas a little bit. I think one thing that was really detrimental was, basically had 4 turnovers. 2 actual turnovers late in the fourth quarter. Sam Ehlinger had a pick that gave Kansas the ball in the red zone. But next drive, it's 40-37, Texas trying to run the clock out. Throw a little screen pass to Jake Smith, and he's unable to hold on to the ball. Fumbled it, and Kansas was able to tie the game up with a field goal after that. And then also, 2 really bad fourth down plays during the second quarter. Tom Herman's way too aggressive when it comes to this. He loves to go for it around the 50-yard line. First one was it was a 14-3 game. It was like 4th and 3 from midfield, and he decides to go for it. And he runs a power play with Jake Smith, who's 190 pounds. So that was a very questionable play call. And then same thing next drive. 4th down around the Kansas 40-yard line, and they were unable to convert. So that was definitely disappointing. Defense played terrible. I'll just say that. They played terrible. Texas put up 50, but definitely kind of left their defense hang out to dry a little bit. Sam Ehlinger did play really well. Was 31-44 for 399 yards and 4 touchdowns. And he also used his legs a lot in this game. 14 carries for 91 yards. Keontae Ingram had a good game. He had over 100 yards rushing and a touchdown. Devin Duvernay, 8 catches for 110 yards and 2 touchdowns. Definitely right in the contention for the Biletnikoff Award that goes to the best wide receiver in college football. So Texas is 5-2 now. Still right where they want to be as far as Big 12 title hopes go. Probably going to play OU again if we can take care of business against Iowa State and Baylor. We'll see. Baylor is, like I said, 7-0. I'm big on Iowa State. I'm nervous about both of those, but definitely good to survive that game. I think Kansas, like I said, very close under Les Miles. Definitely a better brand of football than we've seen them play in the past. Moving on to OU, guys, there's really nothing much to say here. Big blowout win against West Virginia. 52-14. Jalen Hurts 16-17 for 316 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's got a great assortment of running backs with Kennedy Brooks, Ramondre Stevenson, and Trey Sermon. He's got so many receivers as well. Just a typical OU game. Hurts is able to read the defense. Seems like an eternity. Oftentimes finds guys wide open, or the running back's got a big hole on the outside. So like I said, I really don't see them facing another tough test this year. But college football is crazy. You never know what's going to happen. But there's not a game left on Oklahoma's schedule that really gives them any worries. And they're right up there with Clemson as far as teams that probably need to be least worried about contending for the playoff this year. Last in the Big 12, guys, Iowa State pulls out a big 34-24 win in Lubbock against Texas Tech. Brock Purdy continued to play really well. 23-32 for 378 and 3 touchdowns. Breece Hall ran the ball well again. 19 carries, 183 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Like I said, they'll host Oklahoma State next week. It's a big game, and I'm very high on. I was very high on both teams, but I think Oklahoma State not getting the good quarterback plays has definitely hurt them a little bit. But I'm very big on Iowa State, guys. I think they're a team that's really going to emerge as the season continues and possibly be right there in the Big 12 contention when it's all over. And we'll see if they can take care of business against the Cowboys next week. But definitely a big win on the road against Texas Tech. Next, guys, moving on to the Pac-12. Oregon's able to pick up a huge road win at Washington. I picked Washington in this game. I thought they were going to come out playing well, and they honestly did. Jacob Eason, very efficient, 23-30 for 289 yards and 3 touchdowns. Stephen Ahmed, 24 carries, 140 yards and a touchdown. And this game was 31-21 Washington at the end of the third quarter. And for Oregon, whose defense has been really good all year, really got challenged this game. And Washington was able to move the ball really well first half, third quarter. Justin Herbert made too many plays at the end of the game. He had 280 yards and 4 touchdowns. And the Oregon defense did step up in the fourth quarter. Big win for Oregon, like I said. They're now 6-1. Big road win for Oregon as well. Kind of just coasted through the Pac-12 so far this year, and now getting to play a really tough opponent that is Washington. Definitely a big win for the Ducks. They're certainly right in it for the playoff race. They'll still have to play Wazoo and then at USC these next 2 weeks. So certainly could be some trouble there, especially in the Pac-12. You just never know what's going to happen. But, big win for Oregon. They're now 6-1. And then for Washington, certainly disappointing. Now sitting at 5-3 with some tough losses. Make some of those losses like to Cal and like to Stanford look really bad because this is a game they played really well in, and they just weren't able to win it, and that's okay. But it's not okay to lose at Stanford by 10, and they definitely should have won that game at Cal too. So Washington's at 5-3. They'll get a bye, and then they'll host Utah, and Utah's team I'll talk about here next. But possibly an opportunity for the Huskies to kind of spoil somebody else's season. Like I said, guys, moving on to Utah, the defense dominated against Arizona State, and they were able to pull out a 21-3 win. Jaden Daniels, the quarterback for Arizona State, 4 of 18 for 25 yards and a pick. Really bad conditions in this game. It was cold, it was wet. Quarterbacks were really unable to, get into a rhythm. I thought Utah's Tyler Huntley did play pretty well, though. 12 of 19 for 171. Zach Moss, who actually left this game with kind of an injury scare, he was able to come back. It was a head injury. It was a dirty play by the Arizona State defender. But Moss was able to come back, and he finished with 25 carries for 99 yards and 2 touchdowns. And he also had 78 yards receiving. So for Utah, big win for them as well. They're now 6-1, and maybe I was wrong about Utah. I was critical of all the hype they received coming into the year, but I think now we're starting to see why they received it. Defense is playing really well. I bet they really want that USC game back. I think that was a game where Utah didn't play their best football, but like I said, they're 6-1, and they still control their own destiny, in my opinion. They'll go to Washington in 2 weeks, like I mentioned, but that's really the only game that scares me on their schedule. Like I said, Pac-12. Really can't predict anything, but that's the only one that you can really logically say that they might have a significant chance to lose. Just because it's on the road, and Washington does have so much talent. But I'd say other than that, I think Utah's pretty set to finish with 9-10 wins and probably win the Pac-12 South after winning this game. And then as for Arizona State, tough loss for them, but it's still good to see Herm Edwards have them playing these type of big games so early in his career at Arizona State. They've still got USC and Oregon left on the schedule. I'd say for Herm Edwards to have the Sun Devils this competitive year too is definitely a success. Last in the Pac-12, guys, USC and Washington State both dominated at home. Keaton Slovis was terrific in this game, 19-28 for 232 and 2 touchdowns. Keenan Christon and Marquise Stepp were both good in the run game for the Trojans. They're now 4-3. Clay Helton's job security still remains in the balance. I think it'll depend on how he finishes this year. They'll have to go to Colorado. They'll host Oregon. They'll have to go on the road to Arizona State, on the road to Cal, and then they'll host UCLA. And the only really sure game for me, in my opinion, is that UCLA game. I mean, I'd say those other 4 games could really go either way. So I still think Clay Helton does have a shot to keep his job and finish 8-4. So still could go in another direction. We'll see, but definitely a big win for USC. And then as for Washington State, dominated against Colorado. Once again, Anthony Gordon was terrific. He was 35 of 51 for 4 touchdowns. Did have a pick. And like I said, Washington State will go on the road to Oregon next week. They're now 4-3, and I think that's still a game that they can compete in. Mike Leach is a great football coach. Losing 3 straight like they did, I think we saw them come out and play a much more physical brand of football against Colorado, and I wouldn't be surprised if that game at Oregon is close. Moving on to the SEC, guys, biggest story out of there, Florida escaped South Carolina with a 38-27 win. South Carolina came out and played good football. Tavian Feaster, grad transfer from Clemson, actually, ran the ball 25 times for 175 yards and a touchdown. Florida was able to make enough plays in the end to win the game. Dameon Pierce had a huge 75-yard touchdown run. Kyle Trask had 4 touchdowns and made 20 plays in the fourth quarter. One thing I will say, though, the officiating was terrible in this game. Late in the fourth quarter, close game still. South Carolina actually, picked off a ball in the end zone. Should have been a touchback. South Carolina gets the ball in the 20. There was a holding call there on the interception that allowed Florida to score. And then, next series, there was a no call on one of those pick plays you see so much. Plays usually around the 5-yard line, a guy running out route, and the inside receiver will kind of, pick him. Basically, just like you see in basketball. It's not legal in football, and it should have been called back, but it wasn't. Will Muschamp was furious. He actually got a 15-yard penalty for unsportsmanlike conduct, and he was furious about that as well. The fans were angry, especially after that holding call that should have been an interception. They were throwing water bottles. I'm sure there's beer cans on the field, all that good stuff. But Florida was able to escape with a big win. They'll get a bye before they play that big game against Georgia. That game's going to mean so much for the SEC East and really the SEC playoff picture in general. If either Florida or Georgia want to have a chance at going to the playoff, that's going to be a big game for both those. And as for South Carolina, they'll go to Tennessee next week. kind of coming down to earth a little bit after going on the road and beating Georgia last week. I still think South Carolina played pretty well. Certainly going to be interesting to see how South Carolina finishes the year. 3-4 right now. We'll see if Will Muschamp can get the Gamecocks right, possibly get them 6-6, 7-5. But big win for Florida. Next, guys, Alabama survives Tennessee 35-13, but Tua Tagovailoa leaves the game in the second quarter with an ankle injury. This time it was on his right ankle. He actually had the same procedure last night as he did last year. It's some, I'm not a doctor, I don't know all the medical terms, but it's some sort of surgery where they put screws in to hold the ankle in place. He was only going to be out for a week, which is really good news for Alabama fans. They play Arkansas next week at home. Shouldn't be any trouble there. And like I said, it could have been a lot worse for Tua, but he'll only be out a week, much like last year. Like I said, same injury, just on a different ankle. This game was considerably close. It was 21-10 at halftime, and it was 28-13 in the middle of the fourth quarter. Tennessee had the ball on the goal line. It was 4th and goal. Jarrett Garantano tried to go over the top, fumbled the ball. The Alabama defensive back took it all the way back for a touchdown. So, 35-13 doesn't look too close, but it was a lot closer than that. Alabama did not look like the same team without Tua at all. You have Mac Jones as their backup, who's a lot more like Greg McElroy or maybe an A.J. McCarron or, a Jake Coker. One of those guys who's certainly, a solid quarterback, but doesn't have the arm talent that Tua has. I don't think they'll have any trouble next week against Arkansas. And the only thing Alabama should be worried about is getting Tua healthy for the LSU game. They'll have a bye after this Arkansas game, which comes at a great time to make sure Tua is 100%. I think that'll certainly be a big story to see how Joe Burrow plays leading up to that game. Tua's probably going to be a little rusty, having not played for 2 weeks. So I think that's certainly a big story to consider. It sounds like Tua's going to be fine, but definitely something to keep in mind. Next in the SEC, guys, Missouri loses on the road to Vanderbilt 21-14. I mentioned last week how the Tigers, had 5 straight home games, and maybe that, was kind of padding their record a little bit. And, it certainly showed. Lost on the road to start the year at Wyoming and lose at Vanderbilt last night. 2 terrible losses. Kelly Bryant was only 13-26 for 140 yards, a touchdown and a pick. They also had 2 missed field goals. And like I said, haven't played on the road since week 1, and now they're 0-2 on the road against 2 teams that they shouldn't have any trouble with. It's not going to get easier for Missouri. They'll go to Kentucky next week. I think that'll be a pretty evenly matched game. I think with Kentucky's quarterback issues, they should be fine in that one if they can just play a little better. And then they'll have a bye. Then they'll go to Georgia, which maybe a game we thought coming into the week might be closer. But going on the road and losing to Vanderbilt doesn't warrant any hope that Tigers going to Georgia and beat the Bulldogs. Like I said, bad loss. Big win for Derek Mason. Really surprised that Derek Mason wasn't fired after last week after losing bad to UNLV at home. But so they'll have a bye week to celebrate the win, but then they got to go to South Carolina, to Florida. I see those as 2 losses for Vanderbilt. Possibly the last win we see Derek Mason have as the head coach at Vanderbilt. And then last in the SEC, guys, LSU, Auburn, and Georgia all take care of business yesterday. LSU went on the road and beat Mississippi State 36-13. Joe Burrow was just terrific. He's my Heisman front runner as of now. He's 25-32 for 327 and 4 touchdowns. He found Justin Jefferson 8 times for 89 yards and a touchdown. I mean, this offense is so dynamic. It's unreal. They got a great run game with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. LSU's legit, and I think they're going to give Bama a run for their money. Moving on to Auburn, played Arkansas. Bo Nix was terrific once again, 12 of 17 for 176 yards and 3 touchdowns. Found Seth Williams 4 times for 90 yards and 2 touchdowns. Arkansas is just becoming the laughingstock of the SEC West. It doesn't seem like Chad Morris is really improving that program at all. They lost to San Jose State earlier in the year. They're just not compete. They didn't compete with Ole Miss. I think the question is certainly valid. Is Chad Morris the guy at Arkansas? I think only time will tell. But definitely very embarrassing loss to lose by 41 at home. And then Georgia. Georgia came out sluggish actually. This is a 0-0 game until the middle of the third quarter. This is another game that was definitely affected by field conditions. It was rainy. Not much of a passing game by either team. Fromm was only 9 of 12 for 35 yards. Which is actually much better than Lynn Bowden for Kentucky, who's actually a wide receiver, as I mentioned. He's only 2 of 15 for 17 yards. So playing conditions certainly had a huge impact on this game. Georgia was able to ride the coattails of DeAndre Swift. 21 carries, 179 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I think this is a game for Georgia, coming off a bad loss to South Carolina. It's obviously a tough environment with the weather. I think it's a game you just take the win, you move on. Now to the group of 5. Biggest story of the group of 5, Boise State, who is the highest ranked group of 5 team. They fall on the road to BYU. Hank Bachmeier, star freshman quarterback for Boise State, was out of this game, so they went with Chase Cord. He actually played pretty well on the road, but he had 2 costly picks. Can't turn the ball over on the road like that, and BYU is able to win the game. So I think that leaves more room for teams like SMU, Appalachian State, and Navy, Cincinnati, some of those teams out of the American to possibly become that group of 5 team that does go to a New Year's Six Bowl. I think the main two are SMU and Appalachian State, both undefeated. I think App State's a very legit team. Beat UNC in Chapel Hill, won every other game up to this point by at least 10 points. So I think Appalachian State is certainly a team you need to keep your eye on. And then also SMU, now 7-0. A very solid Temple team. Shane Bichelle had 6 touchdowns, a guy I'm very familiar with, and the guy's a really good quarterback. Shane Bichelle can really throw the football. So they'll go to Memphis, they'll go to Navy, and those will be 2 really tough games. But I think SMU is probably up there with Appalachian State is the 2 favorites to make a New Year's Six Bowl out of the group of 5. Guys, that's gonna wrap it up for my Week 8 recap. Another great week of college football. There's really never a bad one. Some of these things you just never see coming. I think anybody in the country would have picked Wisconsin to go on the road to lose to Illinois, but they do. There's just so many good storylines around college football, and that's why it's so much fun for me to make these videos. I mean, this is such a captivating sport, and it's really awesome to be able to kind of keep myself into it by making these videos and hopefully inform y'all about everything there is to know about college football. So thank you so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Like, subscribe. Comment if you have feedback on the video or any questions you want me to answer. I'm always down to talk college football, or DM me on Instagram. My handle is @deeperdive_CFB. I'll leave that in the description below as well, so y'all can follow me there. Don't forget to turn on your post notifications so y'all be notified whenever I upload a video. Sometimes YouTube takes a while to process things, and I just want to make sure that y'all are seeing what I'm posting. Like I said, guys, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.